So this past year, Micah and I were talking to a friend of ours, we'll call her Jane.
Jane.
And we were just discussing faith, Christianity, what we were going to do in the future, what our lives were going to look like. And we got around to talking about Adventism and what our relationship with the church would be later in our lives. And I remember that she said she was still interested in Christianity or religion or spirituality in general. And then we asked her about the Adventist church, the Seventh-day Adventist church. And I remember very specifically that she said it was just kind of a flippant answer. Like, I don't know, I don't know if I'm going to stay in the church. And we pressed her on it to figure out, what is her reasoning for caring about Christianity and God, but not the church in general. And she said that she didn't like the rules, and she didn't care about the rules. She didn't like to feel kind of bound by that. And I think that this is something that a lot of people now are feeling and reacting to, and I think it's part of the reason why people leave the church these days.
Well, it was kind of more serious than that, or at least more like, it was more impactful than that, because I remember I asked her, well, do you affirm the resurrection? You see oh yeah, I think I'll stay a Christian my whole life. Well, actually, I'll have a relationship with God my whole life.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's well, that distinction.
Are you gonna believe in the resurrection? And she was like, and I was like, yeah.
Right. It's like there's a lot of things that she was saying that were very significant, and she just didn't seem to care or grasp what she was actually talking about or thinking about.
Well, I'm Micah.
And I'm Leif.
And welcome to the Faith is Blind podcast.
Isn't blind?
Faith isn't blind, yeah.
Second mistake already. So.
Okay. Well, we explore the deep concepts of Christianity to make it more approachable to the youths.
Yes.
And we want to explore the intellectual side of Christianity as well with apologetics. In this episode, we're not talking about apologetics yet. We're spending another episode just messing around, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
we'll get into it next time. But there's good stuff in this one. There's good stuff in this one. And we're talking about this idea of being spiritual versus being religious. And that sort of idea. Because you mentioned about how people are leaving the church.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we talked about last episode, where people just end up kind of drifting away from the church. There's a study that said 50% of young adults in the Adventist church end up disconnected from the church by 25. And that's what we talked about last time, the reasons for that. They might be exposed to new ideas, and then they never
not ready for it.
They're not confident enough in their beliefs to really confront that. Or their faith could cave because they never are exposed to those ideas.
Yeah.
Or you could leave with frustrations with church culture. And I think that's part of the main reason why people go down a spiritual but not religious route, is that they're turned off by things in their church that they feel are contrary to God.
So this is one of the things,
politics, stuff like that.
So this is one of the things that where they go.
Yeah.
So we discussed why they leave. Now this is where they go.
Yeah.
And this sort of spiritual but not religious. It's sort of a middle ground, There's still some things that I liked about the faith. I like feeling good, and these charged worship services. But I didn't like everything else. So I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious.
Right.
And what you said, I think personally, and you would agree, that it seems to be the result of either an excessively stuffy religion, a reaction against that, whoa, that wasn't cool, or church hurt, and it could genuinely be church hurt in a lot of circumstances.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a generational thing, where there's a generation where the church gets really fundamental, and then the next generation is really stressed and hurt by that, and then they pass it on to their kids, and it just swings from side to side. And since people react so much to what their parents reacted to and small things, I think we're kind of in the generation where everyone is scared of the fundamentalism.
There definitely is a pendulum. I'm glad that you mentioned that. That not only church this sort of idea of like this stuffiness versus this openness, but just in general for a lot of ideas that are like that. C.S. Lewis has this idea in his book The Pilgrim's Regress, and a bunch of other places, and a bunch of other people have this idea as well, of like a north and a south to like ideas, where there'll be one like harder, more frigid set of ideas, and one more like loose and warmer set of ideas. Modern political ideas would be like another like liberal or conservative or something like that. But there's there are these things, and typically the pendulum like swings because it goes one way, and then that way is wrong, and people get upset with that, and then so they swing it back, but they go too far, and then now this sucks, and so they go back, and I just sort of like that in history. That's just that's just how it happens. Yeah, I think that this stuffiness that can happen happens in the Adventist Church, but it's interesting because in the Adventist Church we kind of have both. Other denominations will either just be generally very stuffy or like generally Pentecostal.
Yeah. And then at Adventist Church you have like Whole Life, and then you have Markham Woods.
Markham Woods, yeah.
Forest Lake to an extent. So it's a broad spectrum.
And then you also you also have a lot of difference geographically. So I've been to Adventist churches in other countries and other areas.
Yeah.
And there's a very different vibe depending on what country you're in.
Right.
Like, I've been to some, like, Latin American Adventist churches, and yeah, some are very, like, very much so that sort of stiff-necked thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are way more exciting than any church service I've been to here. And that's not bad, I'm not saying that this sort of stuffiness or this whatever is bad.
Right.
But it's varying. It's variant.
Yeah.
So yeah, this like stuffy thing and these like emotional thing is not bad.
Yeah.
But the stuffy has as its reaction this spiritual but not religious sort of framework as one of its reactions, and I feel like we should address this because it is a very common. I think it's a pitfall, especially in our more youth people because, well, for the reasons we just discussed.
Yeah. So I think with that, a lot of people, it's kind of a weird term, but I think what people mean when they say that, they don't really go to church anymore.
Yeah, that's what it means a lot of time, doesn't it? Yeah.
And they kind of just, like, keep their relationship with God without doing any of the things that correspond to that as far as religion. And I think that there's some issues with that. And I think you can kind of compare it to, like, a car and an engine. You have religion and you have spirituality. Religion is the car. Imagine you just are sitting inside this metal shell, and it's meant to take you places. You could turn the wheel, you can, press all the buttons, but if you don't have the engine there, you can't actually go anywhere. And I think that's also important to address. Spirituality without religion is bad, but religion without spirituality behind it is also an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not going to go anywhere if you don't have an engine in your car.
Yeah.
But right now, I think the bigger concern is people without the car.
Yeah,
you just have the engine, you have the fuel in it, and you can turn it on. There's a lot of heat generated, right? But if you don't have the car, all that emotion, all that energy, it's not going to actually translate to change.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it like that. But you're absolutely right that, like, there's two mistakes that you can make. And there's always, very often, there's going to be two mistakes you can make. The way I thought about it as being wrong was that spirituality is just a part of religion. So I think that if you have the right religion, if you have a right religion, then spirituality, the right spirituality, will just naturally follow from that. But being like spiritual is not necessarily going to entail religion.
Yeah.
So I do think that that religion is important. And interestingly, this idea is very old. It stems back, I think, from something called Pietism, which is a theology that says that having a personal relationship with Jesus is more important than a theology, which
seems kind of contradictory.
It's a little ironic, isn't it? Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people end up saying that, really focusing on the relationship. Like, I have a relationship with God. I don't need all the rules.
Yeah, you
I don't
the
need all the
rules,
religions.
beliefs,
And I think people take all of the doctrines of the church and then really narrow down on the fact that they're rules. And when you think about human relationships, there are always rules to human relationships, even if they're unspoken.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, if you have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, you're not going to cheat on them. You're going to
Yeah.
call them often. You're going to be nice to them. And hopefully the relationship will be transformative enough that you're fulfilled by it and it affects everything about you. And these aren't so much rules that you have to think about every moment, but these are things that should naturally follow from the relationship. So saying that you could completely separate your relationship from God from any of the rules of the church, there might be some rules that are inaccurate or outdated, whatever, but they really can't be separated when you get down to it.
Yeah, I mean, like you talked about, like rules of relationship. I sort of thought about it a different way, in a different way. I wouldn't put it as rules. I would just say as like the style in which a relationship ought to proceed, and that, you know, falls from the nature of the relationship you have. Like if you treated your boss like he was your dad, you know, that would get
It would be
awkward
a
very
problem.
quickly, and then you would probably not have a job for very long.
Mm-hmm.
Or like if you treated your wife like she was just, you know, just some friend that you had,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you're just like very distant from, you know, like, you just call her every once in a while, you know. That's
Yeah.
also not going to work very well. So because you have to understand the nature of the relationship you have with God, I think, to have a good relationship with God. And that's theology.
Yeah.
You know, that is a rule, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
You know.
When you think about it, like all of the rules in the church, you could really compare them directly. Like Sabbath, a lot of people don't like, you know, feeling like they're restricted by Sabbath. But when you think about it, that's just an opportunity to spend time with someone that you have a relationship with.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like going to church,
Yeah.
because like that's the big one.
Mhm.
That when I
People
say
end up
I am,
leaving.
you know, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Very often, what they mean is I'm
I just
just
don't
not
go to
going
church anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, you might be like, oh, I have to wake up so early and go to church and like see all these people that I don't really like.
Yeah.
You know, but like that community is so important, and not just like God said it's important, so it's important.
Yeah.
But, like scientifically and like sociologically, you kind of need a community to get by anywhere. And you know, especially now, because now almost every other like aspect of community and society has just been wiped out.
Yeah.
Like social media has just replaced every single bit of community. There's sort of like there's a book that I read. It's called like Bowling Alone. Yeah, and it's about the decline of like social clubs in America and how that relates to like, you know, everyone's just sort of getting isolated.
Yeah.
And when you don't have that community, you know, you sort of start to fall apart just as a person because of your just psychological and sociological needs.
Yeah.
So like going to church and having that community, A, realigns you with like God's purpose and sort of just like reminds you of God being there. B, gives like people a chance to edify you and you to bless them, and then in blessing them you are blessed. And then, you know, it gives you, and then C, it gives you community.
Right.
You know, it gives you that community that you so desperately need. So there's these things that are just very, very beneficial towards you and towards others, and God knows this, and so He commands it. But you know, we might not think it's, you know, very important at times. Yeah.
Another thing to consider is that people kind of, if you dislike every part of religion here, it's a little bit more difficult to expect to be happy with religion in heaven. Because I don't think, you know, there's not going to be all these churches in our common sense in heaven, but it's also not just going to be this vague spirituality there. It's going to be everywhere. So I feel like, in a way, having a church community, a group of people that you worship with and share your faith with, that's kind of a reflection of what heaven is going to be like.
Yeah, if you can't stand to be with other Christians here on earth, I got bad news for you.
Yeah.
You know who's going to be in heaven
Right.
for all eternity?
A lot of other Christians.
A lot of other Christians.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where they're going to be.
So I do think people who end up not going to church, who claim to be spiritual but not religious, I think that's actually the big portion of people who end up leaving the church. But there are also some people who leave the Adventist church and still go to church, but it's just not as structured and specifically, Adventist.
Mhm.
And this is non-denominationalism, right? There's so many churches around here. A lot of the mega churches are non-denominational. So what is your take on that?
Non-denominationalism?
Mhm.
Well, it's sort of like a catch-all Christianity,
Yeah.
where it's like you can be really vague about what it is you believe, what it is you're doing, and that appeals to a very wide group of people.
Hmm.
And it's good because of like unity and stuff like that, but it's bad because you don't have that doctrinal statement, and you don't really have unity.
Yeah.
Because like not all the non-denominational churches are like
Right.
united
That's,
together.
That's a big thing that I was thinking about. I think non-denominationals, the goal is unity because they're like, we're all the same
Yeah,
because
we're all
not
the
a
same.
specific denomination. So they think all of these churches, it's like one huge denomination. But really, you have all the Adventists, all the Presbyterians, all the Catholics, and then you have these little bubbles.
a billion different
Right.
Jim Bob's Bible Church,
Right.
that
Yeah,
are just their own
performing
thing.
miracles every Sunday.
Yeah.
So it's not really serving the purpose. But I do think what you said was also a good point. There are some good parts of non-denominationalism
Mhm.
in the sense that at least you're still engaging with your faith, sharing your faith with other people. Most
better than
non-denominational
nothing,
churches, they do have some beliefs. You're encouraged to have your own beliefs. But it does require more accountability on your part to make sure that your relationship is
that the
good.
the
Yeah.
doctrine is sound, and very often it can become like a breeding ground for it to sort of like think whatever you want.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Mhm.
You can take that super conservative, like Trump is the second Messiah,
Yeah.
or you can take that like super liberal, like the Bible doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
So, because it does have that like freedom of doctrine,
Mhm.
people
It can-
often
it
take
can
that
mean things like that.
to be whatever.
Yeah, and another thing it could do. We talked about unity. We talked about. But we didn't talk about tradition. I think tradition is another thing that non-denominational churches lack. Mainstream churches, you're part of like a long line of Christians. You have
Mhm.
sacraments often. Non-denominational churches don't have it as much. You have ritual, and none of these things are like the most important. But I think it does serve a role in grounding you in your faith.
I think that the power of ritual is very often underestimated,
Mhm.
especially in Protestant circles. Well, in low church Protestant circles. But very often, God gives us like physical things for us to do because it grounds these like holy spiritual things
Yeah.
in our physical existence. So, we can just relate the lives that we're living to the grand spiritual reality that we do believe exists. But it's hard to think of the spiritual war when you're doing the dishes.
Yeah.
So having these physical reminders, these rituals, helps you a lot.
Yeah.
So like something like even like getting on your knees to pray, like that can have even like a psychological impact
Mhm.
of like humbling yourself whenever you talk to God. And I think they just fortify your spirituality. Baptism, the Lord's Supper, foot washing, just all these like things that we do are just very important,
Yeah.
and for that reason.
Right. And I think the last thing about non-denominationalism, I really can't say that I was going to talk about is resources and influence. And I think this is another thing that's underestimated. Also not the most important thing on the personal level. You could go to a soup kitchen, you could do volunteer work and be fulfilled.
Mhm, yeah.
But on the broader scale, just think about all the things that the Adventist Church and other spiritual, like the Salvation Army. But we have ADRA, like Advent Health, not officially Adventist Church, but same concept. The conferences, the schools. A lot of denominations have these. They're systems, and they're set up by the church to further, God's kingdom. And these often aren't possible in the smaller churches because they don't have the same resources as a whole.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah.
So we talked about non-denominationalism. We're gonna
Yes,
talk
the
about
three things.
spiritual but not religious.
The three places they go.
And I think the third place that people end up going when they drift away from the church, it's definitely less frequent than the other two, but there's definitely a portion that either become atheist or agnostic. And I think that this is less frequent because to become atheist really you have to reason yourself out of your faith, and most people I think just end up drifting away. But
They go into
yeah.
sort of like practical atheism,
Yeah.
practical agnosticism, and that's what
Like,
the spiritual.
maybe there's a God, but
Like at the high end of spiritual versus religious, that's sort of what it ends up being.
yeah,
Being like verbally or like outspokenly atheist or agnostic typically requires just something else entirely.
yeah,
You know, a very much different line of
Mhm.
approach than the spiritual
Yeah.
and religious sort of.
that's
idea.
true. Agnosticism is probably just like really far down the spectrum of the spiritual, not religious.
And then they just go to like
religious.
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Right, but
Yeah.
the biggest issue is definitely the spiritual but not religious.
hmm
Who just stop going to church.
And it sort of creeps in, you know?
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I don't have to go this time. Sort of like what I did with the gym over like a couple months ago.
Yeah,
Where I was like, I don't really want to, I'm a little tired, I'm going to go to the gym this time. And then, you know, you skip,
sooner or later you skipped a week.
and then I skipped the whole month. Well, I don't think I've ever gone a month without going to the gym. But, you know, I started skipping longer and longer periods of time. And then eventually I realized, you know, I'm not going anymore to like the gym. Like, I never go there.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I sort of just had to go back
Mm-hmm.
and just like really beat myself up over it.
It was probably a lot more difficult going back than.
Oh yeah, then the first time, if I
Right.
just stayed in, would have been way easier.
Mhm.
But going to the church and these like spiritual habits, they're sort of like that. You know, religious very often has this connotation of this sort of like consistency.
Yeah.
You know, religiously doing something religiously,
That's
doing
true.
something all the time, like nonstop. And you know, if you think about it, the spiritual gym goer, the religious gym goer, you know, who lifts just like a consistent amount every single time,
Mm-hmm.
gonna do a lot more than this like
Sedentary lifestyle.
the sedentary lifestyle. Yeah,
Right.
it gradually increasing in amounts. And honestly, that sort of just being consistent, even when it's hard, that's what like being a Christian is.
Yeah.
I think. I think that like, you know, believing when it's hard, acting when it's hard, that's sort of how you know you are a Christian.
Yeah.
Like, that's the marker of real faith, in my opinion. So like, you know, the gym. That's just all I'm
Right.
thinking about right now. Muscles grow with resistance. You know, easy lifts don't do as much as hard lifts for
Mhm.
growing the muscle. And, you know, people talk about the brain as a muscle, the spirit is a muscle.
Right.
Coining that. That's
Mhm.
mine. Yeah. If you do harder things, you know, it gets easier to trust God. And you trust God in little things, you trust God in big things. A lot of people think that they can totally trust God in the big things and they like can't trust God in the little things. And it's like, no,
It's not gonna happen.
you probably can't, you
Mhm.
know. You know,
It's a habit.
yeah. You sort of think to yourself, you know, I'm not going to church ever, but if someone said, die for your faith, I would totally do it. And it's like, you know, when they start to waterboard you, you're probably gonna
Just run away.
just run away very quickly. If you can't even go to the church, you can't even get out of bed. You can't even endure that torture for the Lord.
Mhm.
Can you endure, like,
No.
actual torture? Probably not.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
No. So consistency, as you've been talking about, is really important to help you stay close to your religion and stay close to God. And I think after all we've been talking about today, I've come away with two main things, two verses for why religion I think is important as compared to this new movement of vague spirituality. And the first one we've been talking about is community, right? The main reason I think religion is important is because you're worshiping with other people who care about the same things. And I'm sure we've all heard this verse, Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron as one person sharpens another. That kind of ties into the gym that you're talking about.
Lift together. Lift to the gym, bro. I was
Right.
honestly way
If
more
you're-
consistent when I was lifting with Ryan
Yeah.
than when we started to not go together.
Mhm. If you're motivated by other people doing the same things, you're more likely to succeed in what you are trying to do. And I think that's really powerful. Accountability, again.
Mm-hmm,
Just
yeah, definitely.
being motivated by other people. And then the second thing, what we've been talking about, what Jane from earlier
Jane.
was frustrated with, all the rules. People give the rules a bad rap, doctrine. But 2 Timothy 3:16 says, "All Scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness."
Yeah, and the idea I have about like the rules and the doctrine, I was worried about that too. And this happened when I think I might have told this story on the first episode. I don't really remember. But when I was first coming into the faith,
Yeah.
I had this conception where I was like, I thought that the truth was good and that you should seek out truth, but I was really worried that the truth was gonna suck when I found it. That it was just not going to be fun at all, but I would still have to accept it. And I had that sort of tension in my mind and in my life where I wanted to see the truth, but I was kind of afraid of it until I believed in God.
Yeah.
Because, once you believe in God, this all-powerful, good, all-good being, then sort of whatever the truth is going to be better than whatever falsehood it is. Because, God is in control of it, and He chooses the best things to be true. So I'm not really. It's harder for me to be scared of doctrine or of rules, because now even if I don't see it and it doesn't feel like it, I do know, or at least I can trust. I can have faith that these rules and this way of doing things and these truths to believe are going to be better for me and just in general better. So, not immediate payoff.
Yeah.
But long-term stuff.
God
it's
breathed.
Yeah. It's like a kid, eat your vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this sucks. I don't want to eat my vegetables. But then, you're not constipated.
Mm-hmm. You know that your parent has the best interest at heart.
Yeah.
You know that God has our best interest at heart when He was inspiring the Bible.
Making all these rules.
Really, all the rules are just based off of what God, the visions, the messages He gave to the people who wrote the Bible. So, if we truly follow them, it should bring nothing but good things for our life.
Yeah. There's, because I'm thinking about the Pilgrim's Regress, there's a bit, I think, in there where one of the characters sort of asks, why are there so many rules? Because, it is an allegory for Christianity.
Yeah.
And the guy he's talking to, who's sort of his mentor, is when the fruit is poisoned, you have, or when the fruit is poisoned, when the fruit is poisoned, there's a lot of rules for how to eat it safely. So the fruit of this world has been poisoned by sin.
Yeah.
So we need a lot of rules to eat it correctly. It's like how there's a lot of rules to eat a, oh my gosh, what's that? Pufferfish! You know how there's a lot of...
in Japan where they cut them apart and you have to have a special chef to do it?
you can eat a pufferfish, but there's just so much stuff you have to do to make sure it doesn't kill you.
Yeah.
Right? That's all of the stuff in the world. Everything has been tainted by sin.
Mm-hmm.
So we can still eat it.
Yeah.
But you have to eat it very carefully with all of these rules to make sure we don't die.
Yeah.
Right? And that'll be different in heaven
Mm-hmm.
when the poison is removed.
And I think another thing to consider is, I think Adventism is the closest to the Bible, in my opinion. But with any religion, I don't think in the human world you're going to find any religion that has everything 100% right.
Oh, yeah.
And if you disagree with one part of the church, some people may not like stances about women's ordination or something. That's not grounds to leave the Adventist church.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. And I think sometimes people throw away the baby with the bathwater and end up where we've been talking about today. And if you just understand that most of the rules are there to help, that is something from the perspective of youth that we could do to make sure that we stay.
Yeah, and if you have
on the right path.
if you have a theological disagreement and you want to learn if you should stay in your church or you should leave, you should check out my sermon that I did recently about theological triage, or just go to the other people who have talked about theological triage way better than me. But anyway, that's a good resource for knowing if you should stay with the church.
Yeah. So that's something that, from the youth perspective, you could do to kind of be more confident in your religion beyond Christianity, your specific denomination.
Mm-hmm.
From the church perspective, what do you think that the church could do to make sure
What does the church need to do?
Yeah.
Well, just be a better environment, just what we should always be striving to do.
Yeah.
But this isn't mainly, I don't know if I want to say it's not mainly on the church, because
Yeah,
like it is the
I
person's
agree,
decision.
though. It is a personal
Like,
decision.
to come or not to come, and
Mhm.
the church can influence that by trying to just be a good place.
Yeah,
But at the bottom line, it's the person
it's
who
the person's decision.
comes or doesn't come.
Yeah.
One thing I think we can do though is to actually just stop trying to be, too super relatable.
Yeah.
That was
It
honestly
comes so much down to the level of the youth that it's diluting
Yeah.
throughout the church.
when you dumb down like what Christianity is and you sort of
Mhm.
give it a counterfeit version, I feel like that just makes it worse.
Yeah.
You take a 2,000-year-old faith and you put it in skinny jeans.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look great.
Yeah.
I think you should just let the faith, sort of be what it is.
Mhm. And I think it's also a balance with that, because I think some churches do the dumb down thing to be relatable. And then if you discourage from that, some churches just stop youth interactions entirely. And I think that there's a
Mhm.
way to do it where you're involving youth and interacting with youth in a way that could help them strengthen their faith. Like, for instance,
Definitely
you
is.
being given opportunities to preach. I think that's a good example. Just doing more things on a deeper level with youth instead of dumbing down
The shallow
for
thing.
youth. Right.
Just have a relationship with Jesus.
Right, that's all you
That's
need.
every single Sabbath school for
Yeah.
3 years. Yeah.
Yes. Love. Jesus loves you
Just
so
leave,
much.
Jesus loves you so much. That's all we're going to tell you.
Any question? No questions. Please.
Yep. Who's Jesus? Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another interesting thing about this whole the pietism thing. Just who is this Jesus guy? You can't even answer that question. All you need is a relationship with this
Yeah.
guy. Who is he? And then immediately you have to turn to, theology. Like,
Mhm.
oh, this guy is the person who died for your sins. We have sins. What's a sin? Well, there's these laws. Oh, God has laws. Well, that's weird.
Yeah, having a relationship with someone generally entails knowing about them. to some
Yeah,
degree.
you do have to know
Shocker.
about them to some degree.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
And it's important to know about them correctly.
Mhm.
If you drastically misread what your wife likes and doesn't like, that's gonna be bad.
Mhm.
Probably. Definitely allergic to peanuts. Make her a meal with peanuts in it.
Peanut meal.
Make
It's
her.
a big plate of peanut butter.
What is it, pad thai? I think pad thai is
Yeah.
peanuts. You make her a big plate of pad thai and she dies. That's problematic.
Yeah, it is
So-
kind of problematic.
It is important to know who you're having a relationship with, and that's theology.
Yep.
And that's important.
Well, we were gonna do a Q&A. Should we still do the Q&A, or should we save that for another episode later on?
We can do it. Why not?
Do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the question: what does prayer mean? Why do we pray?
Why do we pray? Yeah, just a very simple question.
Mhm.
Just a theology surrounding prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Because, on the face of it, we are told to do this a lot. Jesus does it a lot. We have a lot of examples of prayer in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But, you think and you're like, well, doesn't an omniscient God sort of know?
Why does he need to be reminded? Of
Why does he
this
need to be
person?
reminded? And what sort of thing am I supposed to tell God that he's not
Yeah.
already just going to do if it's
That's
good?
what I thought about. Like people who are sick, praying for people who are sick. Why would God need to be reminded that they're sick?
Mhm.
Does he only heal them because people ask them to be healed?
So, the first thing that I'm going to say is that I have no idea. There are other, okay, and I can't say I have no idea. I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
I have ideas. I have conceptions.
Mm-hmm.
I have some things from Scripture. There's probably people who know this way better than me, and they probably have a book on it. And you know what I say about books on things. I think you should go read them.
Yep.
So
As you
yeah,
do
if-
with books.
If you really want to know more, there's probably good books out there.
Yeah.
I don't know them though. But what I would say is that prayer isn't just for God. Prayer is often given as a part of our devotional life.
Yeah, I agree.
So, when you pray, you get reminded of the grand spiritual reality. So, like I said, it's hard to see the spiritual war when you're doing the dishes. But say if you're praying while you're doing the dishes,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, maybe this menial chore or menial thing that you're doing, you're now doing it to the glory of God,
Mm-hmm.
you're asked to do.
Yeah.
And that's going to make your quality of life a lot better, and it's going to make the things you do and how you act a lot more in line with kingdom goals.
Yeah. That's what that's kind of my conception of prayer as well. It's more for the individual than it is for God. I think God works in everyone, even if there's atheists. I think God could work through atheists. I think God can work for people who've never heard his name. But I think the more you pray and the more that you kind of align yourself with God's radio frequency or whatever, the more impactful those actions that God works through you could be. You know how some people say, like, I was inspired to give this water bottle to a random person, or I felt inspired to do this. I think that the more you pray and the more you align yourself with God, the more often those inspirations could become. That's kind of my take on it.
I also think that God likes it when we like pray and when we ask him for things in faith.
Yeah.
So like I was reading just last night, like Numbers 14, which is a really random chapter of the Bible to be reading, you know.
Yeah. Is that
but
about
it was
washing
very-
clothes? Or
No.
leprosy?
It was actually the Exodus story,
Mhm.
which and it was Moses and Aaron outside the Promised Land, and the tribes are complaining. You know, they don't want to go in because they think they're all going to die. And so they're like, let's turn around and go back to Egypt. And they say that for whatever, like the 100th time,
Yeah.
right? And Moses and Aaron are just sick of it, right? And God tells Moses, like, I'm sick of these people, you know, I'm just done with them. I'm going to destroy them, and we're going to start fresh with you, and you're going to be like the new Abraham, the new patriarch. And then Moses prays, and it's very interesting. He like reasons with God. He gives like reasons why God shouldn't do that. And then God is like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you see this idea of like this sort of like stepping out in faith and like praying for something that, you know, you genuinely do like desire or, you know, you think is right. And then God honors that. And I think because it's an example. So like it's an example to us about like how we should pray for others. I'm not really saying much, am I? And then B, you know, I think it fostered love in Moses. The thing that I'm trying to say, I guess, is that when you pray for something and then God fulfills that prayer, it brings glory to his name. So like when you pray for like healing for someone and then they're healed, that brings a lot more glory to his name than if they're just miraculously healed from nothing.
No one knows.
And no one knows why that happened at all. There's no you can't correlate that to God.
Yeah.
How do you know God did that, right? So he likes it when we pray for things because then his glory is revealed.
Yeah.
And when Jesus prays in John 17, this might be the most famous prayer in the Bible, and he prays for the whole chapter of John 17, or nearly the whole chapter. That's the reason. He reasons with God saying, fulfill this prayer to your glory. Keep my disciples united to your glory. You know, and saying that prayer, you know,
Made a difference.
made a difference.
Yeah.
I certainly think that it did, you know.
Yeah. I think prayer is something that no one has ever fully understood, but
It is very mystical.
yeah, very mystical, but it makes a difference. Prayer fixes things.
Prayer changes things.
Yeah, prayer changes things,
Mhm.
as the saying goes. Yeah.
I think that there's 3 types of prayer, personally. Okay? The first one is a sort of like reasoned conscious prayer.
Mhm.
Okay, well actually, let me say this first. Prayer is a conversation.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
some people like to say that, but it is. Prayer is conversation. And I'm not sure if exactly like, some people like add to that, like, you know, just like talk to God like you would talk to your friends. I don't know if that's exactly how you should do it, because God's relationship with you isn't exactly just of friendship.
Right.
It's a lot more than friendship. It's a very unique relationship. So talking to him just like you would talk to your friends doesn't seem exactly right. But you are talking to him. It is a conversation.
Mhm.
And when you're in a conversation, there's typically types of conversations that you can have. One of them is sort of like what we're having, where it's very intellectual, you know, and it's very, you know, we're thinking about what we're going to say, you know, we're planning out, there's, you know, we know what we're talking about, we did research, and we're like trying to figure things out, and, you know,
Yeah.
Sort of like that level of discourse. But then there's another type of conversation that I will have with Leif, where it's off camera.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of more stream of consciousness. And I think that, there are places for both in the prayer life. So, these very formulaic prayers, or these very, thought out prayers where you reason, like we see Jesus doing in John 17, like we see Moses doing in Numbers 14, like we see a bunch of other people, you give reasons for what you're asking for. You give reasons why you're worshiping God, why you think God is so great. He made the stars, the skies, all these beautiful works.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also a place for this sort of like stream of consciousness prayer, where you're just sort of like, letting praying
God
whatever comes to mind, letting God know what's going on in your life, what you honestly desire, just sort of letting Him know.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place for both of that. And the third is kind of like the second, and I'm not really sure about this. I just sort of added that in, especially because I'm studying 1 Corinthians right now, and it's tongues, the gift of tongues. Interesting, yeah. So, tongues is said to be just like a language of prayer between man and God. And I don't really understand it, but it's something like the stream of consciousness prayer, I would think, but it's like special in some way because doesn't necessarily happen in whatever language you're accustomed to praying to, like English, for example, in the West. But I just thought I'd add that. That could be the third type of prayer, but I don't know much about it. I guess I'm going to find out more in my study.
Yeah. Well, wrapping up with speaking in tongues, that is the end.
That's fun, isn't it?
The end of episode 2.
Yeah, episode 3 is going to be the existence of God. We're finally getting into actually apologetics. So, what you all are here for, presumably.
Yeah. If you didn't like this episode or the last one, hopefully you'll like the next one.
Yeah, it'll be a lot different.
Yeah, maybe a little bit shorter.
But that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening up to this point. And if you listened to the first episode, we're very happy. Please go listen to the third episode, which will be coming out very soon. And
remember,
that's it. Oh, remember, faith isn't blind.
Yep, got it right. Very good.